Right, well, I'm John Cannell of Ballacarnane. The John Cannell, from John Cannell, going back for very many generations. We reckon we've been here for 30 generations. That's a long time. The name originally was Mulray. It should be Mulray today, but it changed about 400 years ago. And that was when there was a family, a Mulray family living here of, I think there was 5 boys and 1 girl. And on those days, there were gravestones on the graves. But the boys and the father decided to take the gravestones off. Whether they were going to put it to the field or what, I don't know. But the mother and the daughter would have nothing to do with it, nothing whatsoever. So they took them off. And they were all dead within a year. All the men in the family were dead within a year. The father and the sons? The father and the sons. Now, the girl that was left married a Cannell from the next door farm.
And what farm was that?
Ballacarnane Moor.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there's only 2 Ballacarnanes on the island as far as I know. There's different other farms, you know, the same name in different parishes, but there's only 1 Ballacarnane. Or 2, really. The Cannell name came from the other Ballacarnane.
Oh, right.
But we've been here, as in a continuous line for, as we work out, is in the 1400s, in as far as records go, or even before that. The proper name for this is Cronkerkillia.
The hill of the keel.
Yeah, could be, yeah. But there's, I'm told there's cobblestones on the floor, and the white cobbles. There's white cobbles at the east end, the altar end, and it was cleaned out about 1910, I think, thereabouts, and that's when this stone was reset here. It had been lying in a hedge further up, and my grandfather said when he was a small boy it was always here, so he had it put back. So. But the graves all run from here. They run in rows up here, and there's a hollow. There's a hollow in the middle here, and the experts tell me the graves were made of stone lintels, and with using a tractor sometimes to top it, it's caved in. It wasn't designed to take a tractor, you see, so the weight has caved it in. But when you get the grass grown properly, you can see rows of them up here. Really? Yeah. There's 1 row, you can see here, there's a row of graves here, there's another one over there, there's another one over here, and they all run in this direction. You know, it's not a very big keel, but none of the keels are. No,
they're not. So your father always had a lot of respect for the keel as well?
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Oh, he wouldn't allow anybody to do anything to it. I mean, they'd be cutting it with the old reaper, and he'd be out, the man on the mower. Those days, the reaper was towed behind the tractor, the horse reaper, and he'd be after the fella because he'd let the blade go in and cut the sod off, and they'd go back and put the sod back. You see, you know, there was no chance of anything happening to it. This stone's been around here all my life. I don't really know what it is, but we'll have a look. We'll roll it out. We'll have a look and see. It's sandstone. And it used to be, well, when it rains, it was all getting filled up with water. I had an uncle who stayed with us here, and he used to sharpen the carving knife. My mother would say, I'm going to sharpen the knife, and he'd sharpen the carving. That's how there's a groove in it. They was dipping it in the water and sharpening it on the sandstone.
It looks like a font, I think, maybe, from the keel?
Maybe connects to the keel somewhere. I don't really know, but it's been around here all my life, so I've got nobody left to ask. No. Because I'm the oldest of the generations that's around here now. My grandfather had 4 sons in the First War. He had 3 brothers in with him. One fellow was killed. He was another marine engineer. He was killed at off the Isle of Wight. they were picking up survivors from a boat that had been torpedoed, and they didn't realise it, but the U-boat was still circling around, and they got the next torpedo in the engine room, and that finished him. And there's another brother. He was in the trenches. He was in Ypres and the Somme and all these things. He told me he went out to Australia after us, and he came back. He came back to the Isle of Man to die, but he said it was too cold to die in the Isle of Man, so he went back to Australia again. But he said how if you stepped off the duck boards in the trenches, he said you were a drowned man, you were up to here in the mud. He said, you know, it was desperate. And he got, the only injury he got was a shrapnel in the wrist. And he said, yeah, he said, you remember I got a mark there on my wrist. He said, that was shrapnel. You know, he said, I went to the medical orderly and he said, hold your hand out. He said, he held his hand out and he poured the ID on it, ran in there and ran out the bottom. He said, it was a clean hole. You can imagine what it was like. My uncle, my mother's brother, and he was in the First War, and he was the Second War. He was invalided out. He was in big battles. He was in the Navy. He was on mine disposals in the First War. He was in the battle in the big sea battles. The Battle of Heligoland was the Battle of Heligoland, and they were given the job of trying to rescue a German mine, or obtain a German mine, so that the British Navy chiefs could take it to pieces and see how it was made. Now they got this mine on board the boat. I don't know, it's off the east coast of England somewhere, but they got this mine on board the boat, and they had it on board, and he was taking the fuse out of it, or whatever it was. Anyway, the thing blew up, and there was 7 of his mates all killed, and he was, why I don't know, but he survived, and it affected him for the rest of his life that his mates were all killed. He said, you know, it really got to him, it really did. But when he was home on holiday, on leave, there was a mine washed up at the Point of Ayre. Nobody knew what to do about it, and there was no Manx radio in those days. But the governor put a word out to anybody knew what to do, and he went down and he defused it on the shore at the Point of Ayre. And that's the kind of fella he was. He wouldn't think twice about his own safety. He would go and get on with the job. He was Marine surveyor after the war, and he used to go down and inspect ships. And he discovered a sham down in the south of England, whereby a firm, or I don't know what a company, just a group of fellas, they used to get a lot of old hulks of boats, just barely passable, and they would send them out to sea they would insure them well, they would send them out to sea, and they would go down and they would be picking up insurance money. And he picked up this scam, and he was blowing it, he really was going to it, and they cottoned on. They tried to kill him. He was in a car, they cut the brake cables on the car, and he was in an open car, and the car rolled over, and he tried to jump out, and the car came down. It was an open car, came down across his back, and he had broken back. So he was high in the water, and he couldn't do anything, you know, by that time he was sort of a semi-invalid. My grandfather's uncle was in Peel, and he was caught by the press gang. They were marching him down along the quay to lock him up. They were probably locking him up in some of the places, the underground cellars there. So his mates, some of them were in the net lofts on the quay. They shouted down to him in Manx, "Hey Tom, where you going?" "Oh," he said, "these sods have got me, they're going to take me out to sea, you're going to lock me up." "Ah," he said, "why don't you throw them in the harbour?" "Aye, I'll do that just now," he said. So anyway, when he got to where they were going to lock him up, he set about them, and he locked one fella in the harbour, and he broke his back because the tide was out. He laid the other fella out and took the keys off him and opened the door where the other fella he'd already had captured 3 or 4 other young fellas already locked up. So he let them out, opened the door. So he came home, and he thought, well, it's no use going to stay up in the yard, he'd be a hunted man. Now this field in those days was covered in gorse, and when you think about it, from here he'd be able to see the English ship out in the bay that they were be transported away in.
Yeah.
So he lived in there must have been big, tall, high gorse bushes here. He lived in the gorse for about a month. And my great-grandfather was about 6 or 7 at the time, and he actually fed him in the gorse every day. He fed him, so they reckon a young fella of that size wouldn't be noticed running about the country. Now that was fine, but at one stage they did come looking for him, but he saw him coming. I don't know where he was, but he was given, somebody tipped him the wink that they were on the lookout for him. Anyway, this fella came after him, so what did he do? He up and he killed him, and I reckon that's the stone he killed him with.
So what does it say? 1825?
1825, and his initials are on the back, TC.
And what was his name?
Tom Cannell. That's him. I reckon that's the stone we killed him with. He killed him, and what was he going to do with the body? Well, that house wasn't built in those days, so there was a lot of rough gorse and things down there, so we buried him. Just handy. He wasn't going to tell the nephew what he'd done with him, so he buried him. So when they come to build the house 25 years later, that's about the right time, yeah, 25, that's 1825, so about 1850 they built that house. When they were building the house, in the foundation, when they dug the foundation, they found a skeleton, and he had red hair in his skull. And that's the skeleton, that's the fella that he knocked on the head down here, I reckon. And anyway, they built the house on top of him, didn't shift him, he's still there. And he's still there, even today he's still there. The farm is, we've got the same field names on the fields. The names are the same as they were all those hundreds of years ago, and we use them today. And when I left school, I said to my father, wouldn't it be better to call them number 1, 2 and 3? And he said, no, he said, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. And now I'm exactly the same. My daughter, who has taken over the farm from me, has now got her head round the names, and she can manage to get them pretty well spot on. The field we're in now is the Woolly Woor, and that's the cow's field. And it was always a handy field for the cows for the yard. I can remember all sorts of things happening in here, like the time my father said he could remember a man sowing seeds with the fiddle up here. And his mother coming up with a big jug of custard to the man, and he drunk the whole jug of custard in the gateway over there. This field is called the Mulla Close, and that one the next door is in Laddie Crink. Yeah, and the big long one you see down by the shore, that was 3 fields, Taltray, Lengesh and Cronaree. Now, I believe one of them means red sand, which is fair enough. There is a sandy piece in the middle. I don't really know what the others. There's Glengesh would be near there's a Glenthur there, that inlet there is Glenthur. It could be near that, I don't know. You got the one behind the yard, there's the Nye, and then you got the Woolly Woors, 2 Woolly Woors, and then you've got the Ballacarnane, the Lag, Cronamana. Across the road you've got the Bullygarbel, which is the horses' field. The next is Dulciamark, which is the Hare's Gap. The next is the Mulyalegich. No, Mulyalegich. There's 2 Mulyalegich, and that I believe means in a day. And in those days, there was a house out there at one time a day. And those days, the days before the local government board and the rest of them, if you could build a house in a field in a day and be living in it for night, nobody could stop you building a house in their field.
Really?
Yep. Yep. I don't think that would hold water today, though.
So this was the old...
Well, you see, it was a cow house coming down here, and it was taken down to build this Dutch barn. It was a Dutch barn with a curved roof on it. Anyway, we've re-roofed it a couple of times since then. A windy spot up here, and it gets, you know, cops it.
So your father put the stones?
Yeah, he put the stones there when they altered the shape of the yard, shall we say.
He thought they were too important to be
Yes,
lost.
yeah. He said, we're not going to throw them away.
No.
There's a stone here in the corner. He's put his name in it. I don't know if it's still legible or not.
Your father did.
Yeah.
Have you got yours in any?
No, I haven't got any. I used to put it in a tree, but the tree, it's bad to grow out. This one here, now, it went on fire. Anyway, my grandmother was at home with, I don't know who, but anyway, she was just a week or two from expecting a baby. And she came down here and loosed all the cattle out. There must have been, it was in April time, I'm told. And she loosed the cattle out so they wouldn't be burnt alive, you see. She came down the cattle thing, burned above her head, and she was down here, big pregnant woman down in the middle of the cattle. So I don't know whether she was brave or whether she was stupid. But I mean, the cattle were a lot of money in those days. Well, they were worth a lot.
Yeah.
And she came down and did that, but I wish they'd have built a few more roofs off, because they put a wonderful roof on. There's timbers like that in it. It's wonderful timbers put in it. So, there was a few charred beams still around about the place up till fairly recently, you know. This is the old stable. And the doorway is worn, and the lintel of the doorway is worn with the horses' homes. In the back of we used to stick up past the collar, and the horse would be ducking his head to go in here and scraping the top. So they must have been walking exactly the same spot every day, because I mean, you know, the grooves are just there. But this is only built with mud mortar. The walls are only they're not well built, but you know, it's holding together.
So it'd be about the same age as the main farmhouse.
Yes,
the old
yes,
farmhouse.
yes. I would think so.
You don't know what age that would be.
No, well, all I can say is this house. There's a house in Michael, which was the first slate-roofed house in the parish. And the one near the Ballacarnane was the next, and this was the next. So it's the third slate-roofed house in the parish. So, you know, the one in the village is, I don't know, 17 something or other. And this would be about, it'd be the 1700s sometime. Well, Burke used to belong to it was belonging to my uncle. And the way it came into the family was my grandfather, he never owned it, but he went to the sale. It was for sale due to a coroner's auction, I think. But anyway, it never made the required price, because he was speaking to somebody, a neighbour, next day, and he said, "How much did Burke make?" Oh, he said it wasn't sold. He said they didn't make enough, it wasn't bid enough. So he said, no. So he went home and he said to his wife, "Burke wasn't sold." She said, "Why didn't you go and buy it?" She said, "I've got some money, I have some of mine, and you've got some." So off he goes to Douglas. And he bought it from the lawyers. So as he was coming down the steps, who was coming up the steps but the man from Ballacarnane, who was planning on doing exactly the same. Well, it sort of got up his nose a bit, didn't it? He wouldn't speak to him afterwards. So anyway, that was fine. So about a week or 10 days later, the bank, which is Dumble's bank, when he had his money, it went bankrupt. And he would have lost a lot. It was only just about a week or 10 days he was in the right side. So he was so very, very lucky. He told any amount of people at the time, he just took the money out in time. Because the bank, Dumble's bank going bust, cleaned out a lot of people in the island at that time. So he was just so lucky, he got it by the skin of his teeth, you might say. Well, he farmed Burke from here for years when my father and his brothers were young. I heard my father saying how they used to be walking the horses from here down to Burke. And how if you got in good time in the morning, you would see the train coming up, the 7 o'clock train, you'd be on the road down here with the horse going to Burke, and the 7 o'clock train would be coming up. So they had to get up before their breakfast in those days.
So he didn't live at Burke?
No, because my uncle built the house on Burke.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a tree in the middle of Burke Yard, I think it's still there today. That was apparently in the centre of the old house that was there. There was an old house there that they levelled. and that was but when it was when horses were used all the time. That tree in the middle of the yard is where they used to tie the horses to when they were breaking a horse in. They used to tie the horse to the tree. So I know the tree is still there. So that could tell you a few yarns too, but I don't know very much about that like I do around here. Well, years ago, the road used to come round around the far side. There was a very sharp bend at the top. My grandfather had this dug out, and he couldn't dig it out. He didn't have any diggers, so he blew it out with gunpowder. And my father could still remember a battle on the loft with still some gunpowder in the bottom when he was a nipper. But I suppose they wouldn't have dynamite in those days either, but the gunpowder they used, and that's what they blew it out. They made a nice curve in the road coming down here because there was a lot of traffic used to come down from the back. I mean, originally this was the road before the bottom road was ever made. But the high road in the bottom was only made about 400 or 500 years ago.
Right.
You know, the one at the bottom. That's only a fairly new road compared to things around here. Yeah. Yeah, in Ballacarnane terms. Yeah, but a lot of traffic would be coming down here, and there was an awful sharp bend there. It would be a terrible thing to get stock down, as you get a traffic down, carts and anything. Everything had to be carted down, so, you know, it was a very big improvement getting this done.
What was this building originally?
I would think it would be a cow house of some description, or a house to keep young stock in. But the old boys were very keen on having several small sheds around the place where they would keep maybe 6 or 8 cattle, or maybe more, but not too many more, because if they got a disease and it went through the shed, it wouldn't take the whole herd, you see. Yeah. So you might, in those days, I mean, the winter time, they wouldn't be fattening cattle in the winter, they were just trying to survive in the winter. Because originally, they would be even crushing gorse for them.
Really?
Yeah, there's gorse mills about the place. I don't know where you'll find one, but there's gorse mills about to chop it all up, that, especially for the horses. I don't know so much about the cattle, but especially for the horses. But anything green would be sort of brought in to try and make the cattle survive the winter.
Yes. Because
it was a case of survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
So that is why there was another couple of sheds further up here, and I think that's what's all been about.
Why they're quite small, and they were obviously thatched, were they?
Yes, that was there's a whole row of stones sticking out. There's one there now, but it was all. My father had that roofed years ago.
And is that a boat on the door?
Yes, that's one of the old nickies. I would say some of the fishermen who were living here in the winter would be doing that in their spare time, on a wet day perhaps, whether it was spare time or not, but that would be there. Whether they were feeling the pull of the sea when they were here or not, I don't know, but they would be well used to making the drawing almost just right. Because they'd be used to that all summer. They'd be all over the Irish Sea in the summertime, and then in the wintertime they would come to the farm. They would get somewhere to live, somewhere to sleep. Maybe only a loft they were sleeping in, but at least it'd be dry and it'd be warm. And they would have to do manual jobs in the farm. I think they were mostly employed on building the hedges around about. That's how the hedges got built.
That carving's got a bit of age on it.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, well, it's only preserved in there because it's been sheltered. That door is sheltered. Well, this chapel used to be well attended on anniversaries and harvest home services. And I can remember being up here when I was a small boy to help my aunt, who was in charge of looking after it, help to decorate it for, I think it must have been the anniversary. Anyway, I had a tall bottle I think it was a salad cream bottle, and I was putting flowers in it, and was watering the bottle, and it fell over. My aunt said to me, "Did you know what to do? Did you know what to do?" I said, "What do you mean?" You put some, go in the road, you should get some stones, put them in the bottom of it to keep it right way up.
She had told off.
Oh, aye. But she would go on, she would go around the neighbours. She went to the neighbour down here, and she said to him, "Are you coming to the anniversary on Sunday?" "No, I'm Church of England," he said. "Oh, yeah, I'm church, or we're church," she said. "Aye, right," she said, "you just be there anyway." You just make sure you're there. So he had to come. My aunt was always, there was a harmonium here, and she used to play the harmonium. She was chief beadle up here. She kept everybody to hand. But after she died, there was very few people going to the chapel, and preachers used to come from Peel. And I can remember it was always my job to help the preachers to turn their big cars out here. And I was most cheesed off one day because H.K. Collett, he was the Speaker of the House of Keys. He was a little man, and he had a great big car, and I had a lot of tacking to get him turned, and I got him turned, and he never even offered me a ride down to the house. I thought he went down in my estimation very, very quickly that day, I tell you. It was a bit of a miserable sort of day, and I thought, well, he's a miserable sort. He could have given me a lift down to the house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this was closed in '63, was it? Or
About that, yes, 60, yeah, around about then, yeah.
So who was going to the chapel?
Just the people round about, just the farms round about. The route to the chapel, the proper road to the chapel was just across the fields. There's no actual road up our road. I mean, at busy times like Harvest Home and anniversaries, people used to come up here and park alongside in the field alongside and such like. But normally it wasn't. It was just the people across the fields, and there was, there was a Sunday school and all here in my father's time, and two services, one in the afternoon and one at night, and one the Sunday school was in the morning. So it must have been a busy space at one time. The preachers all came from Peel. It was in the Peel circuit. This was the northern end of the Peel circuit, so we say. We went down Ballacarnane, and that was the northern circuit, you see. So, but all the other chapels around about used to close when it was a special service here, and this used to close when it was special service somewhere else, you see. That's the way it worked. But I learned to light fires here because it was my job when I was in Nipper to come up and light the fire on a Sunday afternoon so there'd be some heat in it for Sunday night.
So that was the fire.
That was the fireplace was there, yeah.
Just an open fire.
Yeah. We're a bit lost when it gets back to 500 years. I mean, the ink is getting a bit faded on the paper.
500 years and still going.
Yes. And I've got 4 young grandsons coming along the line further back, so that we might have more farmers in Ballacarnane in the future. We certainly hope so. Because when the youngest son of my eldest daughter was being christened, I gave a little talk, a little speech, and I said I wished him luck, and if he goes farming, I hope all the sheep would have 2 lambs, and all his cows would have lots of milk, and his calves would do well, and that still goes today.
The best that you could wish for.
Exactly, yeah.